Senator, good afternoon.
G'day, Tom.
Okay, so housing affordability. As I said, I've done this analysis and I looked at interest rates then and now, the median house price then and now, average weekly earnings then and now, tax scales then and now. And 22 years ago, it would take 38% of your after-tax income to service a median mortgage. The same figure in 2016 is 63%. So someone earning, the average wage, which at the moment is about 80 grand, would have to devote almost 2/3 of their pay packet to servicing a mortgage. Now, that's too much. What do we do about it?
Oh, well, there's no magic or quick fix, but there are some things that we can do to ease the burden. I noticed that, I think it was yesterday, the Treasurer talked at a major speech about the issue of land supply. Look, land supply is one small part of the picture. It's not got nothing to do with the federal government, so he's really given the sort of handball over to the states and said to them, it's your problem. But really is only one very small part of the picture. The thing that the federal government can control is making sure that the tax settings don't favour wealthier investors over first home buyers. That's the critical thing here. And it's why the Greens for a long time have supported an end to negative gearing for anyone buying a new house.
The only thing on that, though, is that the figures on negative gearing show that it's actually people on fairly modest incomes a lot of the time who do employ negative gearing. It's not always those at the top end of town.
It's not always, but disproportionately the benefit does go to people on high incomes. So it's true that some people on middle incomes do gear a property, but most of the benefit goes to people on high incomes. People have got 3, 4, 5, 6 houses, all negatively geared, and it's an attempt to reduce the amount of tax you pay. So you've got to decide, do you want to live in a country that makes it easier for someone to buy their third or fourth or fifth house or their first? And at the moment, we've got the settings wrong. We've got settings that really make housing the domain of wealthy investors, and they squeeze out first home buyers. So, I don't want to be part of a generation that hands down worse living conditions to our kids than we experience. And your own experience is like mine. When, you struggled, but you could get into the property market. Young people can't do that anymore.
What about, though, for example, when I look at what's being built in the inner city, I agree that just opening up more and more suburbs further and further away from infrastructure is perhaps not the way to go. But it's clear to me that a lot of the new housing stock being built is apartments, and everybody from the Reserve Bank down is warning of a massive oversupply of apartments. Is it possible that what we need to do is abandon the idea that you have a house and land and contemplate living in an apartment? Melbourne is a much bigger city than what it used to be.
But, that's a choice for individuals to make, really, and I don't know that you want governments to be mandating that. You give people options. One of the big problems with releasing land on the urban fringe is it doesn't have the infrastructure you need. There's often no public transport, schools, you're very car dependent.
Well, whereas if you have apartments around the CBD,
there are benefits,
they have that.
Yeah, look, I've lived in an apartment and there are huge benefits to doing that. But it's not for everybody, it's not for all families. And so you've got to have a range of options. You're right, there's a big concern about the glut of apartments, particularly in inner Melbourne, and I've had briefings from senior economists who tell me that they're very worried.
But that might be an opportunity. If apartment prices do crash, as could happen, that maybe that's the opportunity for the first home buyer.
We don't want to crash, and a crash in the apartment market is going to flow through the property market, and so you don't want that. But what you want to do is you want to recognise that you don't have investment settings that make it, make property the domain of people who want to invest.
I hear what you're saying.
Capital.
The only thing
and
is
squeeze first home buyers out.
But negative gearing's been around for a long time. It's not a new thing. It's not, to me, a thing that was suddenly, suddenly entered the housing market and changed it. There's other issues like foreigners buying Australian homes, like just the general increase in our population. I look for things that have changed, and it seems to me that negative gearing has been around for as long as I can remember. It was fiddled with by Paul Keating for a while, and then he changed it. That was back in the 80s. If that's not a new thing, do we need to look at the fact that, we've got a population growing at 100,000 people a year? Do we need to look at stamp duty, which collects a lot more money these days than what it used to?
Oh, well, you just need to look what the ACT did with stamp duty, and they've effectively got a plan to transition away from using stamp duty
to a land tax.
Effectively a land tax. They do it through their rates there in the ACT, but so that's another option. I think that's something that state governments need to look at. It's not something the federal government can do on its own. I think stamp duty is a very inefficient tax. It's a
terrible tax.
Most people recognise it's a bad tax, and we need to look for alternatives. But you're right that negative gearing's been around for a long time. But what we do know is if look, people have undertaken investment decisions now. You wouldn't retrospectively do anything about
So
it.
if you got rid of negative gearing, you'd grandfather existing negative
Yes,
gearing,
yeah.
but stop it for future investors.
That's right, exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly what we do. And we'd also reform capital gains tax, so that the discount that you get at the moment, because that's the issue is, do you want to give a discount on capital? And I don't think there's any strong rationale for it. So I think the Labor Party want to reduce the discount by half. We're saying you abolish it altogether.